Hi there. My name is Tiffany Prater, and like everyone else, I am equally excited, yet a little nervous about presenting at TypeCon virtually. I will be giving an overview of the Baybayin script and illustrate its influence in contemporary Filipino art. To start, I'd like to read this stanza from the poem to my fellow children. Our mother tongue, like all the highest that we know, had alphabet and letters of its very own, but these were lost by furious waves, or overthrown like bancas in the stormy sea long years ago. Upon researching the origin behind the script, I learned that Baybayin is not the one, but one of the ancient scripts of the Philippines. I first heard about it at the TypeCon conference around 2019, where Aaron Bell, Jess McCartney, and Aaron McLaughlin presented their research about their Instagram account called Titles in Translation. Some of you may recall it, and I'm not certain about it if it's still going on, but they showcased incredible film type art from around the world. Here, I got to see Filipino designer Lloyd Zapanta's work of the Austin Powers movie title, written in Baybayin. I recalled wanting to learn how to write it, debate on its pronunciation, and wondered why it was one of the dead scripts. Although I am not skilled in speaking nor writing in my native tongue, I was quite intrigued and wanted to connect to my roots. One thing is for sure, as a soul-searching Filipino, I wanted to investigate the reason for its supposedly non-existence. As mentioned earlier, Baybayin is one of the pre-colonial scripts that still exist in the Philippines. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived during the 1500s, they were astonished to discover a multi-ethnic population with diverse languages and, as Aurora quotes, an incredibly high literacy rate. However, they found it quite difficult to influence and conquer the islands, so they thought it was better to learn their writing system. Above, we see the Doctrina Christiana, which was a catechism established in 1593, and you can find this copy at the Library of Congress. This oldest known book contains Spanish, Tagalog, and Baybayin scripts to propagate Christianity to the Filipinos. Ultimately, they stopped incorporating Baybayin scripts in publications around the 1600s, which led to, as Jeff Quintano quotes, its slow departure from the Filipino consciousness. Despite its disappearance, books like these help document and preserve the script, saving it from being lost or forgotten. During the colonization, the Filipinos began to write the Latin alphabet, like the poem you see here, with variations that would eventually reflect the diverse culture. The last stanza I quoted earlier came from this poem, which can be found in several national books like The Selected Writings of Rizal, and the title, Sa Aking Mga Kabata, translates to My Fellow Children or to My Fellow Youth. It describes how the language was prosperous even before the Spanish colonized the Philippines, how the letters traced back closely to Baybayin, and that Filipinos were, and still are, patriotic. Even today, we can see that they are very passionate about their language, as their identity unites them, giving them a sense of freedom. In my research, I came across the left image, and my colleague Kirby Arroyo explains that this is not an accurate representation of the origins. However, you can get an idea of how many scripts exist in the Philippines. Notably, the colonial people from the Luzon and Central Luzon around Manila, which is the orange region on this map, wrote the script Baybayin. The Philippines has no fewer than 120 dialects, and Baybayin is the written system for our main dialect, Tagalog. The word Baybayin has several meanings and comes from the root word baybay, which translates to spell or syllabicate. It means the river, the sea, or the riverside in Tagalog, and in Ilonggo, it means the sea. The natives would write these in bamboo, copper, leaves, stones, and even copper plates like the one you see here. You can find this in the National Museum of Anthropology in Manila. This is the Laguna copperplate inscription written in Kawi script or the Old Javanese script around 900 Common Era. This copperplate served as a legal document that was used to save an old man and his descendants from slavery due to a debt he owed. It is good to mention that Baybayin is not alipata, no thanks to the Filipino scholar Paul Versosa. He made up the word while visiting the New York Public Library in 1914, saying that it had similar arrangements as the Arabic scripts. Weirdly enough, there isn't any proof of the order in writing the strokes. However, over time, we started to figure out how to scribe them. Here, we have our vowels on the top, followed by our consonants. Notice that we do not have the letters C, F, J, Q, V, X, and Z. As I mentioned earlier, the way to write the script is to actually spell it as it sounds. We also make use of diacritics, or as we call them, kudlit, to change the pronunciation of the consonants. For instance, the first consonant here, ba, shows the diacritic is placed above, so it would be pronounced as by or be. If we place diacritics below the consonant, it would then be pronounced as bo or boo. Sometimes a dash or an apostrophe gets used instead of a dot, and they function the same way. Occasionally, we would need to cancel out certain vowels, so we would need to use either a cross sign, an X, or a plus sign. Notably, around the 1600s, when the Spanish wanted to learn the scripts, a priest named Friar Francisco Lopez added the virama marking and called it the virama kudlit. Besides canceling out the vowels, it was a sign that refers to the conversion to Catholicism. So today, the modern Baybayin scripts use an X symbol, a dash, a dot, or even an apostrophe as an expression of decolonization. Thanks to Arroyo for showcasing this example of why we do not spell as we see it and that how we need to be careful with the scripts. Here, we use the toothpaste brand name Colgate. You can try to spell out the consonants, but when you start to translate it to the Latin alphabet, it looks weird, and the word doesn't exist in our language. Also, the underlying word tae means feces. To avoid errors like these, we always spell words as they sound. We also use commas and periods in the script, and they just look like vertical bars. We would write comma with one vertical bar in the middle of the sentence. Likewise, we would use two vertical bars as a period at the end of the sentence. Here I have an example of how we would spell out Atlanta, Georgia, and the letter G is actually pronounced as the letter J, and we would substitute it with the combination of D and Yo. So we would have A, T virama, La, N virama, Ta, then it goes to D virama, Yo, R virama, D virama, and Ya. Learning the history of Baybayin was no easy feat, as I discovered that the locals don't use the writing systems. Old folks in the Philippines, like my grandmother, were only introduced to the script at a young age as a children's fun exercise to copy the consonants only, and they would not use it ever again. Numerous articles like the Manila Times and CNN Philippines criticized that the system is not helpful, not practical, and not money making. A few argue that it is the loss of the true Filipino identity. On the contrary, other soul searchers continue to advocate for preserving the scripts through contemporary art forms such as tattoos, paintings, and murals. Here we will look at these fantastic artists that continue to educate and promote the cultural history. First, we have Christian Cabuay, who is a Filipino artist living in California. His work focuses heavily on the Filipino diaspora and endangered writing systems in the Philippines. He considered himself as I quote, a leading authority for the propagation and instruction of the pre-Philippine scripts. His cultural awakening occurred during the Black identity movement, and his viewers are mostly Filipinos in the diaspora who are searching for themselves. On the left image, he is writing Bahalani and Baybayin. Here are even more images of his artworks. The left one shows us how he incorporates Baybayin into his artwork and spells out Malaya. The next one is a printed photo of a woman with the Baybayin script painted on her back, and it's pasted on a wooden panel. The writing on her back translates to "Bad news from the stars." The next artwork shows an image of a woman representing as Lakapati, the gender fluid goddess, along with certain words like decolonize and makibaka that mean struggle. You can see more of his work on Instagram and his website here. Next, we have Ezekiel Aclaray, who proudly owns Maharlika Hand Poke Tattoo. He specializes in hand tattooing by buying tattoos that pay homage to Filipino roots. It started out as a hobby, and he became fascinated with the manual process. By his brother's request, he started to learn the script and began incorporating it in order to promote the pre-colonial writing system and the culture. Here are some of his images that showcase his tattoo work with Baybayin. You can see more of his work on Instagram. The next artist goes by the name of Margie May. She is a painter who currently lives in France. She paints objects that are quite sentimental to her and significant to the Filipino culture, and uses it as a coping mechanism as she had not been back home for a few years. While living in Toulouse, France, there weren't any Filipinos, and she felt that she needed a way to connect with them. She then created the Baybayin sticker project, where she would print out the artworks in Baybayin. So if any local Filipino would have found it, they would feel connected, even if they didn't speak to each other. As her personality shows, she likes to spotlight the culture in a non-aggressive way. You can find more of her work on Instagram here as well. Finally, we have Taipan Lucero. He is a Filipino designer who used to work in Kobe, Japan, which is where he learned Shodo. Inspired by their culture, he actually quit his job and returned back home to start Calligra Filipino. He calls it a portmanteau of calligraphy and Filipino, where he also promotes the pre-colonial writings and culture through his art. He quotes, "I see it as an art form that is a beacon of pride inspiration, and identity. It is my dream to see traditional Filipino culture flourish today, for it is to rise beyond its colonial confines, for it to thrive and display all its splendor, as it could ignite renewed enthusiasm for traditional Filipino culture and arts. The portrait that you see here, it's called Ilaw, which means light, and this was inspired by his mother, whom he referred to as his guiding light. Here are some more images of his work. The painting on the left is a part of the gold series inspired by gold jewelry called tapang, which means courage. The right image is his mural painting of the Philippine national anthem. The brown and green scripts is the anthem, while the black scripts are single words to kind of highlight the most valued traits of Filipinos, and they translate to honesty, kindness, and hardworking. You can visit his website here or check out his Instagram account. I was excited to learn that in 2019, the Congress of the Philippines passed the House Bill 1022, which reads as, I quote, an act declaring Baybayin as the national writing system of the Philippines, providing for its promotion, protection, preservation, and conservation. They also approved this Bill 8785, which reads as, quote, an act promoting Philippine indigenous or traditional writing systems and providing for their protection, preservation, and conservation. Many years ago, there were no manuals on how to write the scripts, and unless your family preserved the writings for generations, you just didn't know how to write them. Now there are books like these here and Baybayin workshops everywhere. The University of California in Davis has the Bulasan Center for Filipino Studies, where they used to hold a class on writing Baybayin. Recently, in August 2019, the Philstar Global newspaper announced that Google will be providing four indigenous Filipino writing systems for Android users, which include Baybayin, Bukid, Tagbanwa, and Hanunao in Gboard. Here's a video on how the locals can download those scripts into their Android phones using Gboard. As Google Philippines marketing head Gabby Roxas mentioned, we are committed to helping preserve the country's local languages and scripts through relevant technology. Adding more Filipino languages and scripts on helpful products such as Translate and Gboard is one of the ways we show this commitment. So, why is there still a pushback? What does it mean for the scripts? Does it make the locals feel less patriotic? As Arroyo explained to me, as the scripts get popular, it would still be difficult to persuade those who found the convenience through pre-colonization. On the other hand, Professor Michael Charles Jua says, we must let our love for it bloom by itself, for it is a part of who we are. However, all of this proves that Filipino scripts like this can be preserved through keen interest. With that said, I plan on joining the movement by advocating for its acceptance and help provide more variations of the script. Before we get into the questions, I'd like to acknowledge a few folks who helped me with this research. Kirby Arroyo, Christian Kabuay, Margie May, and my family for the translations and finding my calling. And lastly, a Jay Archer for convincing me to give it a try.